Welcome back to the podcast History of Our World. Chapter 55, Empires and Invasions. By all accounts, the Mauryan Empire of 232 BC, the year Ashoka died, was in pretty good shape. There's no threat of war, economy's strong, people are happy, heck, even the weather is holding up. Everything appears to be fine when Ashoka's grandson, Dasaratha, takes the throne, but he only lasts 8 years, and the next 5 successors will only rule for a combined approximate 47 years, before the Mauryan name is totally wiped out. How could they go from a golden age to such a swift collapse? Well, it's not like I've got a straight answer for you. There's no corroborated facts here, it's just a lot of assumptions and theories, so maybe there was an economic crisis? All that money Ashoka spent couldn't have been good for the treasury, and late Mauryan-era coins seemed to indicate a debasement in the currency, using less and less precious metals and more filler, bronze, iron, that sort of thing. Or maybe the later emperors found that it's hard to maintain a massive empire if you can't go on the offensive. Being bound by Dhamma, that law of non-aggression Ashoka believed in, well, it could really be a pain for the emperor looking to expand. But maybe the simple answer is that Ashoka was just too difficult an act to follow. No way any of them could possibly compare. The whole dynasty ends in a spectacularly undignified way when, in 185, the last Mauryan emperor, Brihadratha, was at a military review when, well, as the ancient texts say, reviewing the whole army under the pretext of showing him his forces, the mean general Pushyamitra crushed his master Brihadratha, the Maurya who was weak of purpose. I have scoured as many books and resources as I can for clarification on the word crushed. Everyone agrees that Brihadratha was assassinated in broad daylight, and because the emperor was apparently an unliked fool, no one lifted a finger to do anything. In this context, crushed seems to imply he was just deposed, but I'm going with a different take. That Brihadratha was snacking on some peanuts while watching the parade, and Pushyamitra's elephant was really hungry and made a beeline to grab some and accidentally crushed him on the way. Well, let's go with that. Pushyamitra Sunga, or Shunga, proclaims himself the new king of Magadha. No one offers any resistance, Pataliputra remains the capital, and a new dynasty starts up without any awkward transitions. Now I should mention that because of Pushyamitra's caste, he was a Brahmin, many historians have come up with a different conclusion as to why the Mauryans fell. All that peace and love and embracing Buddhism stuff couldn't have sat well with the traditional authorities of the old Vedic way, the Brahmins. Pushyamitra, therefore, represents a return to the way things were. To show he really meant business, he even performs the Ashvamedha, the Vedic horse sacrifice. Remember that from episode 44? That's where you let a horse roam wherever it wants for a year, claim all the land it walks on as your own, and then kill it in the end? Well, he does it, and I'm sure it made a lot of people happy. But it could also be seen as an intentional and direct defiance of Ashoka's animal welfare laws. Further support for this Brahmin hypothesis comes from the Buddhist texts, which mention how Pushyamitra persecuted the Buddhists, destroyed monasteries, and even offered bounties for the heads of slain monks. But this could again be more exaggerations. His successors don't seem to have gone after the Buddhists, but it's also during this time period that Buddhism loses its most favored status among Indian emperors and kings. Well, anyway, the Sunga Empire is primarily known for doing 2 things: creating art and going to war. Their first military engagement was one they did not seek, although it may have been brought to them as a consequence of usurping the throne. The Seleucid Empire, the successor state of Alexander's conquests in the east, maintained very good relations with the Mauryans, which freed it up to deal with all sorts of problems in the west, especially with Ptolemaic Egypt. However, in the year 250, which would put us mostly in the middle of Ashoka's reign, 2 regions within that empire declared their independence. Bactria, an Indo-Greek kingdom located mostly in modern-day Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and Parthia, which is northeastern Iran and Turkmenistan. We'll reference Parthia again in just a moment, but let's talk about Bactria. It's a really fascinating chapter of history, made the more interesting from the almost total lack of sources. It's a fully Greek kingdom in the middle of Central Asia, blending Indo, Iranian, Helleno stuff into one cohesive unit. Bactria is rich in farmland and makes a fortune off trade as the Silk Road passes right through it. But that's never enough for these would-be emperors. In 180 BC, a few years after Pushyamitra snuffed out the Mauryan line, Demetrius of Bactria invades Gandhara and Arachosia. Those were the two western regions Chandragupta had conquered, and pushed into the Punjab, conquering Taxila. Man, it really stinks to be a Taxilan. Following his reign, or alongside his reign, or a later king, the dates here are really bad, is the Bactrian king Menander. Somewhere in the mid-160s, 150s. Menander does a number on the Sungas, bringing his forces past the Indus. Take that, Alexander! Down the western coast and even towards Pataliputra. It's said that he joined up with independent kingdoms in the south to launch an attack down the Ganga. This is the farthest any foreign invader has made it into India, and all seems lost for sure. Is there anything that could turn his ravenous blade? Oh wait, I know. Someone get the Buddhists. At his court in Sagala, modern-day Sialkot in Pakistan, Menander hosted the Kashmiri Buddhist monk Nagasena and participated in a lengthy philosophical exchange with him about life, ethics, and the tenets of Buddhism. The whole thing is a back-and-forth dialogue recorded in the text The Questions of King Milinda, Milinda being his name in Pali. The dialogue is a bit too long to quote here, but suffice to say it's a really fascinating read, and long story short, Menander converts to Buddhism and leaves India alone to fight the various steppe tribes that were a constant threat to his kingdom. That's 2-0, Buddhists. Good work. Oh, and real fast, Bactria doesn't really last more than about 125 years. It's seriously weakened by those Parthians, and then crippled by the Sakha or Scythians, who in turn were running from an even stronger group called the Tokharians, or Yueh-chih, a confederation of Indo-European people who settled into Bactrian lands and finished the conquest there. Still, the Bactrians were just one of the threats the Sunga had to face. Around the 2nd century BC, central and southern India completely broke away to form the Satavahana Empire. And even Kalinga, who suffered greatly from Ashoka's rage, got a chance for revenge. Under the Jain king Kharavela, Kalinga was able to make a comeback during the 1st century BC to seriously threaten Sunga power, advancing as far as Pataliputra itself. But once the king died, the republic couldn't really maintain its momentum, and it fizzled out. The Sunga dynasty lasted roughly 110 years, and there seems to still be some debate over how many official kings it had. Some say 4, others 7, but it looks like there were actually 10 kings in total, meaning the average length of a reign was 11 years. That's a lot of kings in a short amount of time. Not a lot is known about most of them, but a few were regarded as nearly completely incompetent. One of the kings, Sumitra, was obsessed with drama and spent all his time at the theater. During one play, he was so deeply engrossed that he didn't notice when one of the actors leapt off the stage and severed his head with a scimitar as a lotus is shorn from its stalk. So there's that. The weakness of the last Sunga king, called Devabhuti, was that he was overly fond of women. Spending all his time with them, he decided to leave Pataliputra for the city of Vidisa, apparently infamous as a sin city, and left the empire in the hands of his Brahmin chief minister, Vasudeva. But this minister became disgruntled at doing all the work without any of the acknowledgement. Opportunity arose when he heard the news of how Devabhuti had fallen deeply in lust with the wife of another Brahmin minister, and had that minister killed to more easily pursue his desires. But the wife found out the truth, and killed herself to escape the king's lechery, leaving behind her now orphaned daughter. Vasudeva contacted this daughter and proposed his plan for revenge. She would dress up as one of Devabhuti's queens, charm her way into his quarters, and poison the pig right then and there. Which she did, and Vasudeva becomes king and founder of the Kanva dynasty around 75 BC. There's only a few things I can tell you about them. There were 4 rulers, they lasted about 50 years, and they were conquered by the aforementioned Satavahana Empire. That's pretty much all the knowledge that exists about them. Frustrating, right? And that's where I'd like to take a break from India for a bit, with the last Kanva king being killed in battle in the year 30 BC. It's the farthest in time we've gone so far in the series, and it reminds me, I haven't done a time check in a while, so let's do a quick tour of what's happening in the rest of the world. There's a lot going on in the West, from Europe to North Africa and the Near East. If I could pick one thing to tell you, it's that this is the year where Octavian of Rome is victorious over Mark Antony and Cleopatra, thus paving the way for him to become Rome's first emperor. In sub-Saharan Africa, you've got the Nok culture in the west, migrating Bantu tribes in the east. It's hard to find recorded history here. It's pretty quiet in Australia and Oceania. And in the Americas, you've got the Maya, about 100 years to go before there's an unexplained cultural crash. And the city of Teotihuacan is steadily growing, although who founded it is still a mystery. As for India and South Asia, the Satavahanas will rule in the south for another 200 years or so before fragmenting into smaller states. And the final conquerors of the Baktrians, the Tokharians, or Yueh-chih, will then move into Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwest India, or rather a branch in the group called the Kushans. Their empire, which will last for about 250 years, is famous for their artwork, which blends Indian and Greek styles together with spectacular results. Their coinage too is really quite stunning, with the obverse of the coin showing the current king, as most coins do, but the reverse might depict a Hindu god, or a Zoroastrian one, or Greek, or even the Buddha. It's pretty neat stuff. But that's where I'm going to leave them. The Kushans, or Guishuang, have a pretty good position nestled between the east and the west, reaping the riches that the Baktrians once enjoyed. And that's mostly due to the good relations they have with the land of China, famous for its luxurious, almost otherworldly mystery fabric. But thousands of miles away from this episode, in the mid-1st century AD, Emperor Ming of the Eastern Han Dynasty had a vision, as recorded from the Buddhist text, the Mo-tzu. In olden days, Emperor Ming saw in a dream a god whose body had the brilliance of the sun and who flew before his palace, and he rejoiced exceedingly at this. The next day he asked his officials, "What god is this?" The scholar Fu Yi said, "Your subject has heard it said that in India there is somebody who has attained the Tao and who is called Buddha. He flies in the air, his body had the brilliance of the sun. This must be that god." To which Emperor Ming sent envoys south into India to discover more. Well, he might be going south, but we'll be heading north to finally explore one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. And if you thought my pronunciations were bad now, haha, you just wait. I think I'll keep Laszlo Montgomery on speed dial. And if you know who that is, you'll know where we're heading next. In Chapter 50, we're off to China, on the podcast history of our world.